So our next speaker is Serra. Laura started here at the Audacity project, Samuse, 1.5 years ago, I think, something like that. And so she will share what she has been doing until now, and that is a scoping review on the use of biomechanical and psychophysiological measurements in music performance, comparing different levels. And then Laura will also speak about what's next, and that is very soon, actually. So take it on.
Hello everyone. So we organized this event mainly because we wanted to create community between researchers that are doing the similar things as us, but also to present some news project and receive some feedback and open some discussions to inform better what we do. So the Samuse team, actually Sylvie presented us already, so I'm going to do that quickly, but we have as principals investigators, we have Professors Luc Niels, Ines Chigi, and Luis Leiva. And then as PhD students and postdoc collaborators, we have Hajer Gamodi, Saravana Kumar Duraisamy, and me. And the starting point of this project stems from the fact that it's well established within the literature that learning to perform a music instrument has an impact on the structure and function of our brain and body. At the structural level, we see that musicians exhibit regional increases in gray matter in auditory, motor, and prefrontal regions, which means those areas become denser and support enhanced processing related to music. And they also show enhanced white matter connectivity in pathways such as the corpus callosum, which means that different parts of the brain communicate more efficiently, especially those involved in sound processing and movement coordination. At the functional level, these anatomical changes correlate with enhanced sensory motor and cognitive functions, such as heightened sensitivity to timing and micropitch variations, and enhanced ability to plan and execute really fast finger movements and complex postures. So, taken together, these adaptations contribute to what is often described as a more efficient system. And efficiency gains are not limited just to neural processes, but they are also seen in muscular and observable movement patterns, which means that this efficiency is reflected in the fluid, flexible, and expressive performance of expert musicians. In this learning process, to achieve expert performance, it is really important the relationship that the musician develops with the instrument. In fact, is one of the main goals of many teachers, is that the music student develops such a control of the instrument that it becomes experienced as if it was an extension of their body. It becomes transparent. In the beginning, the instrument is an external object to be processed, requiring a lot of conscious effort, but as learning occurs, it starts to be processed as if it was part of the body. So from this perspective, expertise in music performance means embodying the instrument, and learning to play an instrument is conceptualized as an embodiment process. At least, this is what this theoretical framework argues. The three-order embodiment framework, which suggests that the learning-related structural and functional adaptations that we just mentioned lead to the feeling of having incorporated the instrument as an extension of one's body. From this perspective, learning to play an instrument has an impact on the body at three levels. The first level refers to the impact on the basic sensory motor system. So these are neuroanatomical and muscular adaptations, such as structural brain changes and posture, that happen outside of conscious awareness. At the second level, it refers to the impact that training has on cognitive and motor functions, especially on the development of predictive internal models. So as a musician learns, he or she develops a coupling between the actions afforded by the musical instrument and the auditory consequences of these actions. It's these couplings that form the basis of predictive internal models that allow musicians to anticipate what's going to happen from their movements. And as a result, they can adjust them in an anticipatory way. So the result of this is a more efficient sensory motor system. The last level refers to the subjective experience of embodiment, to how these first and second level changes support feelings of agency, control, and ownership over the instrument. Given the impact that playing an instrument has on the body, we hypothesized that this process would become apparent in a set of indicators, which we called embodiment indicators. These are quantifiable markers that capture the impact of learning on the body, which can be measured through biomechanical and psychophysiological measurement tools such as fMRI, EEG, EMG, and motion capture. The question was, can we identify embodiment indicators that characterize skill level? To answer this question, we first started with a scoping review on studies that use these measurement tools, psychophysiological and biomechanical tools, to quantify differences among performing musicians. We found 37 studies that examine music learning using these methods. So it was important in the selection criteria of these studies that either they analyze the musicians before learning and after, or at least they compare two different levels or more. From these studies, we extracted a series of indicators that differentiated the musicians at different levels. And this is to show you an example. For example, we have the first category of indicators, which were related to the development of sensory-motor associations that occurred with training. So I wanted to show you an example of how I categorized these indicators to the embodiment levels. For instance, there is one of the included studies by Wallman and colleagues that investigated changes in brain activity patterns and their relation to performance improvements in cello playing. So they recruited 13 non-musicians and taught them to play the cello twice a week for 1 month. At the same time, they scanned participants with an fMRI before and after week 1 and week 4. And they measured performance and evaluated performance through pitch and timing accuracy. They found that after learning, when participants listened to trained sequences, they showed increased activation in motor areas compared to before learning and compared to non-trained sequences. Also, they found that playing at week 4 activated similar regions to those from listening, but that was after the training. So from this, the authors suggest that because of learning, an auditory motor circuit is established, reflecting the development of these sensory-motor couplings. The authors also go to suggest that these sensory-motor couplings are the basis of internal models, and they go on to suggest that these mechanisms facilitate action planning and control. So then, in the review, we categorize these indicators to the different embodiment levels. In this case, for example, the sensory-motor couplings would be adaptations at the first level, so changes that happen outside of conscious awareness, which then give rise to the indicators at the second level, which would include those that reflect that the musician has developed and refined internal models, such as indicators of cognitive and motor control, movement consistency and accuracy, and, for example, movement smoothness. So these are some of the other indicators that we found, indicators related to neural efficiency and muscular efficiency. And here in the table, I put the measurement tools that they used, but I also extracted the exact measure that the studies use to identify these indicators. And then what I presented until now was the studies using psychophysiology. We also have studies using motion capture, and these are the indicators related to movement, so movement coordination, movement smoothness, consistency, and accuracy. In this review, given its initial methodological focus, we didn't find indicators at the third level, which would include the subjective experience of the musician. With this takes me to highlight some of the limitations of the included studies in the review, which actually challenge the identification of reliable and objective indicators of different skill levels. And also these limitations highlight that the neuromuscular and motor dynamics underlying skill performance are still insufficiently understood. For example, from the review, most of the studies had 20 participants as a mean, So small sample sizes. Also, most of the studies investigated adults, so with a mean age of 28 years. And for example, I also found a lot of heterogeneity in how they defined expertise. Some studies, after 7 years of experience, already were saying they were experts. Others, the threshold was a 15. So that also poses some question into how do we define expertise. Most studies also compared beginners or non-musicians with experts, but we don't have a lot of studies with intermediate levels. And then, for example, the studies that we used, that they studied were pianists. 50% of the studies looked at pianists, with less studies than drummers, violinists, cellists, and we didn't include wind instruments. Then the tasks is something that has been mentioned before. The tasks were really simplified, laboratory tasks, keystrokes, drum strokes, sorry. Also in violin, for example, we have really single bow movements. So that also poses the question of how do we study the complexity of music performance, which is something that has also come up in this symposium. And we had some longitudinal studies, but they were really short, so spanning just over a few weeks. So there is not many longitudinal studies looking at learning over long periods of time, and most of them were cross-sectional. Another limitation was something that Ernest has mentioned, is that we rely on single measurement techniques. Most of the studies, for example, use motion capture only, or fMRI only, so there is less and less studies looking at the combination of different measurement tools. And from all these limitations, we want to propose an experimental protocol to try to advance in our understanding of these indicators. And this is the San Muñoz protocol, which we will start the experiment soon. We are now starting to collect participants. We have an aim of collecting 200 participants. And as you remember, it was an Audacity project, so it's a bit audacious. We plan to collect from beginner to expert, going through all the skill continuum. We will be based in Luxembourg using the Luxembourgish curriculum, and we will collect the participants from the conservatoires, so classical music, classically trained. We will control for practice time per week, years of experience, conservatoire training, and also if they play other instruments. And we will focus on violinists and clarinetists on the basis that pianists were the most studied group. And for example, pianists are, when they play, is a more discrete movement, and violinists and clarinetists, you have continuous sound and continuous movement, which it's different in terms of analysis of the movement. And then to move forward from the simplified laboratory task, we will take repertoire from the curriculum, so classical music pieces. We will take short excerpts. We won't play the whole piece, but we are trying to go into more ecologically valid repertoire. But our study is going to be cross-sectional because it's hard in a period of a PhD to do a longitudinal studies, although it would be really interesting. So overall, the scoping review allows us to start to respond to this research question, if we can identify embodiment indicators that characterize skill level, but I also wanted to narrow it down a little bit. And in these studies, we want to look at whether the strength of the coupling between auditory and motor areas predict these indicators, so better task performance, and then higher movement efficiency through I would like to measure them through movement indicators and also muscular indicators, and then if these couplings also predict higher neural efficiency through measuring cognitive load using fNIRS. And we will also introduce a small part of self-report indicators on self-efficacy, on perceived effort of the task, and focus of attention. So briefly, this is the measurement tools that we are going to use. We have the motion capture system that is markerless. Then we will use EMG, DELSI system, fNIRS, and eye tracking, we're still debating, but the idea is also to use eye tracking. And this is the protocol. I'm really interested to hear also your comments on the protocol. So the idea is that the musician comes in the laboratory. We have here a room where we have the motion capture system, but the system is also portable to the conservatoires, because as I said, for example, the motion capture system is markerless, so you don't have to put a suit or anything, and the cameras are portable. So the idea is that the musician takes some time to warm up in the room, and then we will ask 4 different conditions. They will respond first to playing. They will be randomized, but now I say them in this order. Playing, then we will ask them to imagine the piece without moving. Then we will ask them to listen to the piece, and then we will ask them to move, but not to produce any sound, with this idea of looking at the sensory motor couplings and to see if we see differences in that in terms of expertise. Then, in terms of analysis, this project follows a data-driven approach. We are going to integrate this multimodal time series, and then through machine learning, inspired by a study from D'Amato and colleagues from 2020, that uses machine learning models to identify indicators of expertise, with the goal to identify objective neuromuscular, neural, and movement markers of expertise. So this is our project. I'm actually finished. So I'm really hoping to get your feedback and suggestions. And yes, thank you for your attention.
Some questions, please.
Thank you. I think it's a very interesting project. You said that you are going to use the Luxembourgish model of education, but I saw that you are going to go also to Belgium and to France. How do you address this?
Yes, because it might be hard to find 200 participants in Luxembourg. It's a small country. So we were thinking of expanding to Belgium and France. So we might need, so how we are organizing is according to the Luxembourgish curriculum. We are categorizing them into beginner, novice, competent, and we are going up to 5 levels. So if we need to go to France and Belgium, we will need to see how does it match with their levels. But because it's conservatoire training, for example, now in choosing the repertoire, I was also checking the curriculum back in Spain, and I'm finding consistencies with the levels and the repertoire that they choose.
Especially on that, for instance, the name conservatoire here in Luxembourg is not the same as in Belgium or in France. So you would have Luxembourg and France having more or less the same definition. I don't know what it means, but if you go for Belgium, for instance, conservatoire is higher education. It would be just from bachelor and a master, so there would be no equivalence.
Okay. Yes, we are also planning to go to music schools. The idea is that because we will give them a short excerpt to learn. So what we are looking for is to have first a definition of their level according to their system, to then give them this excerpt that they have to learn. So that will be the requirement, and not so much whether they are in a conservatoire or not. The main goal is that they train through classical music. Yeah.
Last question, also about Luxembourg, because you said it would be for the conservatoire, but there are other music schools who have the same levels, so why particularly just the conservatoire?
No, I mean, yeah, okay, that might have been a confusion, because for me, conservatoire, for example, in Spain means the whole, since you are 7 years old to 18. But we are not restricting to conservatoires in Luxembourg, also music schools. and for example, they learn music also in the international schools. So we are also open to that. I guess the main key goal is that they train through. For example, we are not going to collect folk musicians or pop musicians. Yes.
Because there are many students actually that also are in the music school, not
Yes.
just the conservatoire.
Yeah, no, we are open. We want them as well. Yes.
We contacted ook daar in Eijen. So.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, this looks fascinating. And I particularly like the protocol and the many sort of windows into performance you're looking at. I'm particularly curious about the first play one. Seems like a crucial one. And I wonder, in sort of setting up that environment in which they're going to be performing, is the idea there to bring it closer to sort of a relatively low anxiety practice environment, or is it more about trying to emulate a performance? I mean, I imagine with many cameras and people around, it might feel like a performance.
Yes.
And maybe related to that, I mean, will you be looking at their sort of anxiety levels in terms of trying to measure it or control for it, or perhaps even manipulate it to see how that aspect of play and performance feeds into these other measurements?
So in this specific experiment, we are not looking into performance anxiety, also mainly because I'm also trying to simplify it the maximum, because it's easy to go crazy and say, I'm going to measure this and this, but then when you go inside into the design of the protocol and the measurements, you see that it's actually quite hard then to interpret the data, to have many measurements. We are not going to look into that. It's true that in the protocol we will ask them actually to learn an easy piece and then a more difficult piece to introduce certain level of load. And then we will take actually measurements that I forgot to say, hormone level measurements. But the analysis of this data, I think it will be later in the project.
Sure. I mean, I agree. It certainly doesn't have to be a study about performance anxiety, and you wouldn't have to manipulate it. But it seems that because so many of the measurements are tied to physiology and behavior and cognition, it does seem like it'd be a highly influencing factor, and probably based a lot on their state anxiety and their trait anxiety as well. And I saw at the bottom you'd be collecting sort of a number of things around sort of self-efficacy and whatnot.
Yes.
I wonder if it'd be actually quite easy to add a quick sort of state and trait anxiety just to be able to control for any sort of overall differences. Also, particularly if you're going to be going across such a wide age range and such ability levels, it could be a factor that might be just useful to control because it had such an outsized effect.
I was actually thinking of asking them about perceived stress.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a scale, not a lot of questions.
Yeah, exactly. Just the STAI, the KMPA, just one of the sort of the standard state traits of measures, so that you at least build a control for some aspect.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But otherwise, it's fascinating.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Very interesting presentation. Thank you. My question is, you were talking about different orders of embodiment. So, how do you skip from one order to the other? I mean, do you think that embodiment automatically increases with skill levels? Or are you looking into specific training, instrumental training, that can enhance the incorporation of the instrument into the musician body schema?
Really good question. Thank you. So that is a question that I have been posing myself, whether we are going to see more embodiment of the instrument in experts or not. Intuitively, I don't think so necessarily. I think at each level of skill level, you can develop a relationship with the instrument that feels somehow in control. And then when you increase maybe the difficulty of the piece or of the task, then that is disrupted. But this research is partly trying to answer also these questions, and because the embodiment framework it's quite theoretical. Yeah. So this experimental work hopefully will help to understand if we can separate the levels or how they connect between them as well. But right now I don't know.
Thanks.
Thank you, Laura. Very, very nice. I see it already like 2 months ago.
Yes.
It was nice to receive. I have a question. Like, have you ever thought of comparing the effect of embodiments in music learning in combination of multitasking? Meaning, when you play an instrument and you try to sing, because I do it a lot. I'm a singer and a musician, and I feel that when I embed a lot in musical piece, I can concentrate much better on the performance. So I was like, do they have any combinational study of embodiments in the multiple instrument playing or?
Good question. The studies that I found on multitasking was more to introduce an external task to introduce cognitive load and disrupt the musician. So actually, I don't know. I would have to look into it.
Because I think it's very connected. It's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because now that I have, for example, I'm not good singer, so I don't embody my singing. For example, I embody a lot my guitar. So what I do is when people talk to me and I play guitar, I can keep going and play my guitar and talk sometimes. And I was like, I will never do it while singing. I have to concentrate. And when I try to do both, I'm much more concentrated on my less embodied instrument, which is singing.
Mm-hmm.
But when I have to think about the story that I want to tell in front of an audience, I don't have to think about the technicalities.
Mm-hmm.
I have to just act like an actor. Mm-hmm. And if I can embody it in my practice of music learning, meaning singing,
Mm-hmm.
then I can be an actor on stage and not someone that is doing a complicated task and it's doing some hard math, counting.
Yes.
So I think it's good, maybe, for your study to try to have this point of view of multitasking embodiment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be interesting because you are comparing also two musical tasks, one that is learned and the other one that needs still more practice to become more embodied.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. I will think.
And one last thing is, I wish to know how the embodiment evolve over time in the learning, because I think it's, of course, now I have 15 years of experience and I can embody guitar, but maybe it drops, and from the first 5 years it drops, because maybe I stopped to do less lesson. So it would be good, but maybe this is for longitudinal study.
Yes.
Yeah, this is for longitudinal study.
That's why we need
This
to
is anyway, great. I'm looking forward to hear some news.
One more short question and then we have another coffee break.
Look, Laura also had.
Okay. Sorry. Who's going first? Just let you and then we'll. Yeah.
I'll keep it short. Thank you, and I just wanted to ask you if the third order of embodiment will be how you are willing to find indicators about this third order. Also, since you're expecting to work with beginner to intermediate level students, and also I wanted to ask if the anxiety of performance can be related to this third level of embodiment, because when you don't have presence and a sense of ownership, you have anxiety most of the time. But I was asking myself if there is a connection.
Yeah, thank you. So how are we gonna ask about it? Is through self-report measures. We will ask them about agency, how in control did they felt after playing. We will also ask them about perceived stress and also how well did they think they did. And then we will present this, in the beginning I showed these circles that they were going together. And there's actually a scale where you can mark how do you feel visually. You mark these two circles, there's 7 in total, and as a representation of how you feel with your instrument. And this will be done after they play. But then at the end of the experiment, my idea is to have a small, not long, because we don't want the experiment to go really long, but have a small interview with the participants to grasp a little bit more what happened while they performed. Yes. And the second question about the anxiety, that's a good question. I haven't focused on anxiety, on the literature about anxiety, so maybe for future studies. Thank you.
One final question then?
I have many questions, but I will only ask one. I'm interested in I like your layout of the task with the different blocks. And I'm curious what you expect to be the difference between the listening and imagery conditions. I guess you're looking for evidence of embodiment during those tasks.
Yeah, so parting from the hypothesis that sensory motor couplings are at the basis of embodiment, I want to see if the differences in these conditions in terms of brain activation also reflect these movements of efficiency and control. In terms of the listening and the imagining, I'm also interested, for example, in imagining whether are they imagining the sound or are they imagining also the sound and how they move. And I would hypothesize that indicates a difference of level, in the sense that as a musician, if you ask me to imagine a piece that I learned, I'm going to imagine myself playing. While maybe if you learn the piece but you're still in your first years of learning, you will imagine the sound, but that's a bit intuitively the idea.